Chapter 14, The House Divided. First question is, how did the acquisition of land from Mexico contribute to sectional tensions? It started out with tensions because of a couple of things: the expansion of slavery and the Wilmot Proviso. So most Americans pretty much agreed that the Constitution left the issue of slavery up to individual states to decide. But it didn't talk about what would the impact of slavery be in the nation's territories. So therefore, the debate turned to Congress. So in 1846, a Democrat from Pennsylvania named David Wilmot, who is pictured here, proposed that Congress bar slavery from all lands acquired in war with Mexico. Northerners, of course, liked his idea. Southerners were very angry at this idea. The South was interested in maintaining political parity, which basically means that they wanted to have equal numbers of states that were slave and equal numbers that were free. And Wilmot's proviso would have allowed for slavery to be banned in all of these new territories, which of course the South didn't like. The United States Congress voted on the Wilmot Proviso. The Northerners had a huge majority and easily passed it. In the Senate, however, the Southerners defeated it. So this became an unresolved issue. When Congress ended its session in 1848, there was no plan that had won a majority in both houses. Northerners, of course, are demanding no new slave territories anywhere, and Southerners wanted slave property to be extended into slave territories and allow those states here, if they wanted to become slave states, to become slave states. The election of 1848 was held and was largely determined on sectional lines. As you can see, the candidates are Zachary Taylor and Lewis Cass, and Martin Van Buren making an appearance again. But you have a Whig in the White House now, and the election was very close, and again, an interesting thing going on here as Whigs are trying to become a national party and Southerners still have alliances with some of the northern parties. And this is kind of interesting because it's not going to stay that way for very long. Let's go to debate and compromise. In California and New Mexico, on that question, Congress convened in December of 1849, beginning one of the most contentious and most significant sessions in its history. President Taylor urged Congress to admit California as a free state immediately and to admit New Mexico as soon as it applied. Of course, Southerners were very angry at this. So, Henry Clay offered a compromise. He said, admit California as a free state, but organize the rest of the Southwest without restrictions on slavery. Require Texas to abandon its claim to parts of New Mexico, but compensate it by assuming its pre-annexation debt. So Henry Clay is trying for some compromise, and as a result, the Compromise of 1850 is passed. And in it, there are four things. First, California now enters the Union as a free state. Secondly, New Mexico and Utah become territories where slavery is going to be decided by popular sovereignty. They're going to let people vote on whether or not they want those states to become free or slave. Third, Texas accepts its boundary with New Mexico and receives $10 million from the federal government. In other words, Texas will not expand past this boundary with New Mexico. Fourth, Congress is going to end the slave trade in the District of Columbia, but enacted a more stringent fugitive slave law so that any slaves that run away can be caught and there will be more severe consequences. So, please go back to this slide if you need to refresh your memory about the Compromise of 1850. Some factors helped unravel the balance between slave and free states, and one of those was the Fugitive Slave Act. The Fugitive Slave Act was basically a law that allowed Southern slave owners to be able to reclaim their property if the slaves ran away. There's nothing in the Constitution talking about slaves and property. And Northerners routinely, as it says here, interfered with fugitive slaves, sometimes harboring them and sometimes trying to hide those slaves so that they could escape. As you know, abolition and abolitionists were very popular up north. Fugitive Slave Act would give a stronger, more brutal consequence for escaping, and this would be very important, and this would cause more tension between the South and the North. Another factor that helped unravel the balance between the free and the slave states is the publishing of a book called Uncle Tom's Cabin. Even more Northerners were turned against slavery by this novel by Harriet Beecher Stowe. Now, Harriet Beecher Stowe never ever set foot on a plantation, but she published this book about the horrors of slavery. It sold 300,000 copies in its first year and more than 2 million copies within 10 years. The effects of this helped to crystallize Northern sentiment against slavery and to confirm white Southerners' suspicion that they no longer received any sympathy in the free states. So sometimes books change history. This book made sure that there was going to now be a very strong divide between the North and the South. Abraham Lincoln, when he met Harriet Beecher Stowe, he said, "So this is the lady who started the Civil War." Some facts about it here: 300,000 copies in the first year, as stated before, and 2 million in a decade. Of course, she wrote about slavery when she had never ever been on a plantation. So if you're a Southerner, you think, lady, you don't know what you're talking about.